We are going to install the Quill ADA onto the Colex SharpCut Pro. For that we need some zip ties, a pair of snippers, Phillips head screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, an Allen wrench set, obviously the Quill, and the power cable specifically for the Colex. So the first thing we're going to do actually is remove this cover and remove the cover down here so we have access to the housing for the wiring. So on this side, the first thing we're going to remove is the vacuum hose so that it's out of the way. And use the Phillips head screwdriver to remove two screws on the back here that hold the hose in. Now we'll use an Allen wrench to remove 4 screws on this side of the cover. Now we'll remove these 4 screws on the other side of the cover. With the screws removed from both sides of the cover, we now just need to carefully and slowly lift straight up and set the cover down behind it. To remove this cover, there are 4 screws we need to remove. 1 here, and 2 on the back side. So we'll start by removing these. On the back side of this cover, we're going to remove this bracket first that holds the vacuum hose so that the vacuum hose is out of the way. With the vacuum hose clamp moved, we're going to remove this screw and this screw. You might need to use your body to kind of hold the cover on, because once we remove these 2 screws, it's going to want to fall off. To completely remove this cover, there are 2 connections we need to undo right here. It's important to note that when we're putting it back together, the red goes to red and green goes to green. So we'll just disconnect these 2 connections and then set the cover down. With both covers removed now, the next thing to do is mount the Quill so that we know how much lead to give ourselves on the power cable. So we're going to take the provided mount, remove the tape, or the liner on the tape, and install it right here on the side of the housing. Then I can install the Quill and have an idea of how much power cable I need to leave. So the next thing we need to do is clear the path for the wire. So we're going to remove this outer housing of the wiring harness, as well as on the back side of the machine. I'm leaving one attached, as you can see, just to make it easier to facilitate putting it back on once I've run the wire. I'm going to do the same thing on the back side here by opening up the top of this wiring harness, just to make it easier to just set the cable in instead of having to try and run it through. All right, to start running the cable, we're going to first plug it into the Quill so we know where to start it. And I'm going to use a zip tie to tie it up at the beginning here. Then we need to grab the other end and we can start feeding the cable through. With the cable run through the first harness, we'll go ahead and close that harness cover. On the back side here, we'll start by zip tying it in place in a few different spots. Now this first turn, this curve here, can be a little tricky because we can't just lay it, there's a bracket under here, so we can't just lay the wire down. So we will need to feed it through. So you just have to find a spot where there's enough room for the end of this cable to slip through. And once it's through there, it'll go through no problem. With this corner navigated and the cable in place, we can actually now just push it down in between these channels here, or these guides rather, that are in the middle. Once we get to this point with the cable, we're going to go ahead and cut the zip ties that hold this protective covering so that we can run our cable through here. Don't want to leave it open and exposed and in contact with this metal housing. So. There's also another zip tie on this end that we will need to cut to let the cable push through. With the cable out the other end here, I'm going to go ahead and pull it all the way through and then re-zip tie my cable covers. With the cable all the way out now, I'm going to go ahead and zip tie it in place here before we run it through the wiring harness. This one I'm not going to bother opening the covers because they're on the bottom and there's enough room in here to just run this cable quickly. So now we have the Quill installed, the cable run, all the covers put back together. The final step is to actually contact Colex so that they can remote in to your computer, install the tool profile for the Quill, and then work with you to calibrate that tool profile to accommodate for the X and Y offset.